Hi, this is John Pettigrew, and you're listening to Talking Through My Hat, a podcast that explores bookish businesses, the fantastic people who create them, and what those people have learned. I'm a hat wearer, a recovering editor, and the creator of Future Proofs, enabling editors and authors to work better online. To find out more, visit wearefutureproofs.com or follow me on Twitter at John_Pettigrew. Welcome to this week's Talking Through My Hat. Today I'm talking with Dominique Raccah, founder, publisher and CEO of Sourcebooks, which has over the years grown to produce everything from children's books to college guides. It's the largest woman-owned book publisher in the USA, as well as the largest trade book publisher in Chicago. Dominique herself's long been recognised as an innovator and was named Publishers Weekly Person of the Year 2016. And her writings appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg and the New York Times. So welcome to the podcast, Dominique.
Thanks an awful lot, John. I'm excited to speak with you.
Oh, absolute pleasure to have you. So Sourcebooks itself, it's pretty well known by now, I guess, but how do you describe it to people who maybe haven't come across you before?
You know, we are a group of people who really believe that books change lives. And as a result, we publish books that really make a difference, right? Mm-hmm. So you see us publish books like you know, Radium Girls, or This Is Where It Ends, which is a book, a YA title about gun violence, or This Book Is Gay, which is the most stolen book in high school libraries. So, you know, we are trend forward. So that means that, for example, we are a leading publisher today of STEM books for little kids, and really introduce that trend into the American market. In fact, I think in the international market. And, you know, we're a group of book lovers who are constantly innovating and looking for ways to connect readers with stories that will have an impact.
Great. So, I mean, Sourcebooks has been around for, what is it, 25 years? More than that, isn't it?
31.
31, yeah.
But, you know, I know you, John, know and in case anybody else is, you know, is listening, it's just so you guys know that entrepreneurs don't normally just run one company, right? Our companies evolve and change. So the company that I started 31 years ago bears absolutely zero resemblance to the company that I actually run.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask, you know, how has it changed? I mean, it's quite a lot of years, but I mean, when you set up a publisher in the first place, what was the idea? What were you trying to achieve then?
So the company I founded was actually called Financial Sourcebooks, and I was looking at banking deregulation, and I was interested in helping bankers and other financial services organizations to really think about and deal with the changes that were taking place in their tumultuous market. Yeah, that turned out to be fully and completely uninteresting, I would say. And I moved from doing that to publishing business books and business books that went into the trade channel. So Financial Sourcebooks was a company was really a direct mail operation. It was really kind of a totally different model. And Sourcebooks, I just got rid of the financial. Sourcebooks became a company that was really aimed at, you know, at the retail trade book market and libraries, and started with business books. We went from business books to being a leading nonfiction publisher. So as you said, we publish, for example, the Fifth Guide to Colleges, which is the #1 college guide in America, and it is a 50 share of the college guides sold. So it is a dominant, you know, kind of business. Yeah. And we have dominant businesses in a number of nonfiction categories. And then about, 10 years ago, we entered children's books, and about 15 years ago, we entered fiction. So, you know, and really when you enter fiction and children's books, the world changes for you. Right? You start thinking in new ways, and and publishing very interesting new kinds of authors. And we've been a strong, player in fiction, in publishing books like, Sold on a Monday, which is really taking off right now, and as well as publishing young adult titles and children's titles that really make a difference.
Yeah. So why, back in the late 80s, why did you set up a publishing company in the first place? I mean, where did that come from? It's always a slightly odd thing to do. It's
particularly odd when you know nothing about book publishing. I'm as just a person, I'm a human being whose life has been dominated by books. So I think I can tell you the key decisions of my life in books, right? And so when I decided this is going to sound so funny when I tell people this part of the story, I came out of advertising and marketing. I worked for Leo Burnett. I was there 7 years. So I knew a lot about advertising and marketing. And I was deciding between publishing and advertising. And I chose publishing because I thought publishing was a service to authors and that they would be the people out front, and I would never have to be in front because I am pretty ferociously shy.
Okay, so that works out well.
Yeah, that has just, John, so that didn't work out at all. I think the gods have a sort of a funny sense of humor.
Yeah. So from that very simple beginning, as you said, you've kind of diversified out into so many different things now. How do you manage a company that does so many different things? You're doing nonfiction, you're doing fiction, you're doing children's, you're doing college. It's a lot going on. How do you keep all of it straight?
So, well, I don't know that you keep all of it straight is the right way of thinking about it, right? So the approach I've taken is really around, it's going to sound, I've never really said it quite this way, I imagine. But I think you've got to have, to be important to your retail partners, you need to have extraordinary strength in very specific categories, right? So I would say to you, we are not everywhere in nonfiction. We are in reference nonfiction. And we are in memoir and biography history, that part of nonfiction.
Yeah.
I don't publish cookbooks at all. I don't publish cookery at all. Or I don't publish, home, those kinds of books at all. I think for our retail partners, they know that, for example, in the category of going to college, we publish every book at the top end of the category. So if you want to look at the #1 college essays book, it's going to be ours. The #1 college guide book, it's going to be ours. The #1 going to college book, it's going to be ours. Right? So they don't have, it's not like they have to think about us in a very broad spectrum. They think about us within, so similarly, I would say in fiction, we publish book club fiction. We publish books we publish mystery, mystery thriller. Those are the two categories we're in. There are lots of other categories in fiction. We tend not to publish those, but we are really good at book club fiction. We've had more Target book club picks than probably any other book publisher in America, which is extraordinary.
Yeah. So it's about specializing, even when you're diversifying, almost kind of thing. It's never scattergun. It's always very targeted.
You need to be, if you're going to be, if you're going to scale, you need to be very important to the retail partners that you work with, and therefore you need to have something that is extraordinary and open the conversation, any conversation. So I can open any conversation in children's by saying Chris Ferry, because he is the dominant, probably the most important writer of science for children, quite possibly in the history of the world. Okay. So anytime I walk into a retailer who is interested in children's books and I say, so I want to have a conversation about Chris Ferry, or I want to have a conversation about Marianne Richmond. We've sold 4 million Marianne Richmond books in the last, 10 years.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, I mean, somebody's going to want to talk to me about, Sandra Magsamen, who is has the number one baby book in the country. So it's not scattergun.
Yeah.
Or scattershot. It's, in fact, I think that's the mistake people make, is that they think they can be all things to all people.
Uh-huh.
I think that's challenging.
Yeah. So as you say, you're relying on strong brands in specific niches. Do you create those or find them?
Right. Thank you. That's exactly the point I was going to make. We create them.
Uh-huh.
So what Sourcebooks has learned to do over the years, which is very distinct from what I think the conglomerates end up doing, is that we actually build brands.
Yeah.
Right. So Marianne Richmond was a somewhat known brand, but wasn't a 4 million unit brand, right?
Yeah.
Chris Ferry has done 1 million units, 1 million books in the last year, right?
That's not bad.
He was not, he was an unknown self-published author.
Uh-huh.
Right? Susanna Kearsley was published by Macmillan. I think they dropped her, and then we picked her up, and we've sold, I think, 500,000 units of Susanna Kearsley's books.
Yeah.
Right? So we make authors. We make books. That is the job of a publisher. It is what a publisher does.
Yeah.
And what happens when you're in that model. So there's a bunch of things that are derivative, right? In that model, we publish authors. When we say we publish authors, not books, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about we're interested in the author's career track. We're interested in how do we grow an author from beginning to the next level, whatever that next level is. That means that we follow an author on whatever diversion they may choose to go on. The other thing that's true of us is we're going to have very long contracts with people, right? So we're going to have not one book, not two books. With Marie Benedict, we have 5 books.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a long relationship that you are building over time. And your job, our job as publishers, is to create extraordinary success for these creative folk who we get to serve. It's interesting, John. Listening to myself, I just realized I actually did accomplish what I set out to accomplish then, because that was the vision I had when I started.
Yeah, just for a different group of authors, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it, how these things happen?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So you're placing these long bets really on these authors that you want to follow for, as you say, for their career. How do you identify them? I mean, clearly there's a secret sauce going on here. That
is really about data. That is, it's about both taste and data.
Okay.
So I think editors will talk about taste.
Yeah.
I will probably point to taste as it is informed by the knowledge base that we have.
Okay, so what sort of things are you looking at then? Because the authors you've talked about already, you have quite a diverse background. It's not that there's a pattern really obviously in them.
No, there isn't. So really, we're looking at we're the model we're using is from the reader outward. So I think there was a big change that happened for us when we started doing development work on things like apps and ebooks, and that was, we became very very informed by readers, which is a different methodology than the methodology that is being informed by one reader.
Yeah.
Right. So it isn't so much my taste that we follow. But it is very much, and in fact, I would say we don't follow my taste at all. It is very much being informed about and paying attention to what our readers are paying attention to and interested in.
Okay. And how do you find that out in advance? I mean, is it mostly about tracking sales, or are you doing focus groups? Or
No. We do focus groups. We do a lot of trends data on the front end. We do a lot of, so for example, an understanding that there's, I think everybody has an understanding today that there is an interest in forgotten women's voices. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we were looking at that as a category 5 years ago.
Okay.
So we have a lot of books in that category.
Being ahead is always good.
Being ahead is actually part of the job.
Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of viewpoint, because in a sense, as you say, it's kind of what publishers should be doing. Very often they don't. Do you think it's because you have, as you say, you didn't come from a publishing background, you've approached the business on its own merits kind of thing? Is that, do you think, why you've ended up taking this slightly different, well, quite different route to deciding who to publish and how to publish?
I think that the 7 years I spent at Burnett had a lot of implications for the company we became. So first, I would say that we serve authors in a way that is different from, so for example, we treat authors very much as I saw us treat brands when I was at Burnett. Mm-hmm. And as a result, you have people who have a lot of different relationships within the organization. They don't just have a relationship with the editor.
Right.
Now, that also has some implications. It means that, if editors leave, for example, you have a more robust relationship with that author, because that author has relationships throughout the organization. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's one part. The second part is we think of marketing in a very broad way, and we believe that marketing makes an extraordinary difference to the success of an author. Uh-huh. It is probably the biggest frustration point for most authors is marketing.
Yeah.
If you talk to authors, they will tell you how frustrated they are, right? And so us treating marketing from an innovation viewpoint and a data-centric viewpoint so that we can explain what we did, why we did it, the outcome of it, here's what didn't work, here's what did work, that makes a big difference for authors.
Yeah. So you're doing things quite differently. You're doing things your own way. You're setting out a very clear strategy for how to do things. But how do you kind of go about learning to run a business or learn to do it better? Are you the sort of person who will read other people's business books, or do you kind of go, you have a vision, I'm going to charge ahead and do that? Or are you kind of taking advice from people? What's your approach to learning yourself how to do things?
Oh, that's such a great question. It really is, because we just talked about it yesterday, in fact, at a breakthrough meeting. So I think I think the CEO is always the limit on an organization. Uh-huh. I think we are absolutely the cap on how well the organization can grow. And as a result, we have to constantly be growing and learning. And so at Sourcebooks, we've implemented something that we call growth mindset. Right. So if you haven't read Carol Dweck's, I don't publish it, Carol Dweck's mindset book, I urge it on everyone. And by the way, we as an organization, as a management team, read books all the time. And actually, Todd did a blog about, Todd Stockey, our senior VP and editorial director, did a post about the books that have created Sourcebooks. By the way, we published, I think, only one of the 8 books that he listed. But generally, the way that we learn is we do several things differently. The first is that we have inculcated growth mindset throughout the organization. Growth mindset is the belief that we should be constantly learning and growing.
Yeah.
And and should be learning from our mistakes and our failures and thinking about that differently. So that point of view is throughout the organization. And that's actually a much more robust concept than I'm going to do it justice for in 30 seconds that my description is going to be. But the second thing that we do, that we have really put into place at Sourcebooks is a tremendous transparency throughout our organization, right? So we learn from one another, and we have every 2 months, we have all company meetings, and I mean all company meetings, in which we describe the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's going on for us, which is really tough if you're a CEO, trust me.
Yeah.
And the third thing that we've done, and we've done it since the very beginning of the business, is a quarterly offsite that we call quarterly of the leadership team, where we basically talk about how the business is going and what we have in store and in place, how we're performing, what our vision is. So, for example, the next quarterly, which is actually not next week, but the week after, is about Sourcebooks 2020.
Right.
And and it is a full day of every part of the business coming together and saying, this is how much growth I think we can generate by 2020.
Yeah.
And it's a very different approach, I think, than letting. So there are two ways that publishing companies can grow, right? Mostly publishing companies are limited in some ways by the inbox that comes from agents, right? So what is it that you're obtaining from your agent partners?
Yeah.
Right. But that's not how we think. We have great relationships with agents. Don't get me wrong; those are important partners for us. But we actually don't build that way. We build based on our own vision about what's going on in the marketplace. I think that having a constant conversation about innovation, constant conversation about data, constant conversation about what's going on for our retail partners. That's really where the action is. The rest of this, rest of this is noise.
So, and that kind of takes me on to one of my next question, which, you clearly you have a very clear way of planning ahead. What is it that you think about 5 years from now to make sure that Sourcebooks is still there, still growing, and is being successful? Or 50 years from now, how do you get things lined up on those sort of slightly longer timescales?
Well, 50 I haven't tackled, but 5 I can tackle, right? And usually, and I've said this before, I tend to. So we're a little bit differently organized. I work about 2 years out from the rest of the organization.
Okay.
So the stuff that I was looking at in Frankfurt and planning for there is about 2 years out from where we're going to be right now. And so I think that provides you with, first of all, it creates an incredible momentum and an energy, right?
Yeah. There's always something there that's
right to have forward. People excited about this is completely new. I've never seen anybody do this, but here's something I think we're going to give. We're going to be testing.
Yeah.
So we're testing stuff right now that nobody. I've never seen anybody try. I have no idea if these things are going to work, but
you've got to try them, don't you? Yeah.
I think, for example, Put Me in the Story, right? Put Me in the Story started from an idea.
Yeah.
That came to us actually because of our authors brought it to me. I believe that we should be doing development that is a solution to problems that our authors and retailers have. Like, I'm not interested in developing my own ideas. My own ideas are probably very lousy. Valerie disagrees. She thinks I've got great ideas, but that's not my experience. So my experience is that my ideas are okay, but when my retailers or my authors are telling me about problems that they have that I can solve, that gets interesting.
Yeah,
right?
It's the same kind of thing you see in the tech world. It's that thing, you've got to start with a problem. Don't start with a solution.
Right, exactly. Otherwise you're, well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But so I was kind of really interested in solving that problem. Now we're 5 years into it. There's several things. So first of all, we are the personalized books platform for Barnes and Noble, for Walmart, for Disney.com. We are an extraordinary experience. But more importantly, and by the way, we're mobile first, and we're consumer centric, and it's a B2C experience, and it gives us a ton of data. Yeah. All of this is true. Absolutely all true. Also, though, we have sent over $1.5 million in extra royalties to authors because of Put Me in the Story.
Brilliant.
That is found money. That is money they would not get if we had not done that development.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is what innovation can do. So when you ask me about 5 years from now, I think there's a bunch of developments that we've got in place that should get very, very interesting right about that.
Right. And I guess that thing is it's having a bunch of developments, not pinning everything on one.
Exactly.
Because you never quite know what's going to do the best, do you?
Exactly.
Yeah. So when thinking about kind of at a more personal level there, what do you find hardest about running a business? So, you've had a bit of practice of Sourcebooks now, I suppose, but what is it that's hard for you, and how do you overcome that?
I think that there are several things that that can be very, very challenging, right? Uh-huh. So I think that failure can be very confronting.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of work internally on myself. And that's why I got so attached to the growth mindset concept, so that I could rethink failure into a frame that made it viable for me personally and our organization as a whole, right? So that we could look at things and understand that there is an iterative nature to the work that we do, particularly experimental work, right? So I think that understanding that has been really a growing experience for me. Yeah. And then I think also one of the things that's a little bit strange now is, I suppose, is that people believe they know things about you, and those things that they believe they know may be different from the person you believe yourself to be. Uh-huh. Right?
Yeah.
And that happens when organizations get larger, and part of my job is saying no, and I get to say no a fair amount, right?
Yeah.
So that's been a learning experience for me as well, because like any human being, I want to be liked, and that breakthrough meeting which I was describing to you earlier, where I really am beginning to learn how to, learn how to authentically talk about things that are going well as things that are challenging, has been a really great growth opportunity for me. And I think has been really useful for the leadership team as well as the people of Sourcebooks, right? That they learn how to authentically talk about success and failure.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the hardest part about running a business is all of those kind of very confronting things. One of the mythologies we have, and it's really a mythology, is that entrepreneurial companies go up and to the right solely. But that's not been my experience. You go up to the right, and then you plateau for a couple of years, and then you go up a lot. And then you plateau for a year or two, or you may even go down a little bit, and then you go up a lot, and that's actually how business works. It says, you need to, so we're right now in the middle of an extraordinary growth curve. And that's a great thing. I mean, I love it, but that also has challenges, right? It stretches people run out of bandwidth. You've got to make decisions about things you're not going to do that you thought you were, all of that.
Yeah.
But I think you persist because, we're really passionate about this work, passionate about books. I think, we're an organization and that really believes books change lives. We're mission driven. So being mission driven is very different than I think, being a regular business, right?
Yeah.
So we're mission and vision driven. And as a result, we end up growing a lot.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So in the face of all that, all those challenges, all that need for growth and this kind of stuff, what is it for you that brings you back every day to Sourcebooks and keeps you going and makes you, yes, this is what it is?
Oh, it's always, I really am a person who is a service person at heart.
Uh-huh.
So I love the growth that I see in our people, and that I really, and I can say this really authentically, that like, this is the thing that keeps me going is, yesterday I had lunch with Marie Benedict, as it happens, with one of our top customers. The lunch was supposed to be an hour. They had an hour slated for it. We were there 4 hours. 4-hour lunch. I haven't done a 4-hour lunch since Burnett.
That's the days of mythology, 4-hour lunches.
Yes, this is the days of the martini lunch. I mean, like a long time ago, right? But this was an intense conversation about, women and women's power and the, what's going on in the US and what's going on in the UK and, and famous women and, and they had, all of the women who were at the table, all of our customers had read, The Other Einstein and wanted to talk about who Einstein was and then the talk about Hedy Lamarr, which is the next book, which is The Other Woman in the Room, and her being a scientist as well as, and what it mean when the patent office, she
was unbelievable.
Unbelievable. I'll send you a copy of the book, John. It was an unbelievable 4-hour moment.
Yeah.
And that every day, the emails I get from Marianne Richmond's, the conversation I had with Kate Moore about Radium Girls, the extraordinary discussion I have with, Christina about Sold on a Monday, all of that. The conversation with Sesame Street about their goal and their mission in the world and how they change the world. Yeah. It is that every single day I wake up and I get to go into the very best job in the world because I get to serve those people and make a difference. I mean, it really makes, like, if you talk to any of these authors, they do not want to be the people who do all the mechanics and operations, and publishing is a job of details. It is hundreds of details. It is far more complicated today than it ever was before. Just the work we've done on metadata and optimization. Yeah. Right. Just that work is just, stuff that no author, no creative person is it's got to be daft to be excited about it, right?
A certain special sort of person,
Yeah, but I'm a data junkie, right? So I'm a geek, and I'm an ex-mathematician. I really love that we get to do that on their behalf.
Yeah.
And create a difference for them. Yeah, that rocks.
Brilliant. Well, that's fantastic. Thanks very much for your time, Dominique. That's been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So thank you again to Dominique for that conversation. There was a lot to unpack there, isn't there? So I'll be going back to listen to this again over the coming weeks. one of the first things you said was that as somebody in charge of a company, you do need to set aside your personal strengths and your personal fears and just get on and do things you don't want to. For Dominique, that does mean public speaking. She's really good at it, but it's not something that she necessarily wants to spend time on. But the emphasis that they have at Sourcebooks on authors, that it's the job of a publisher to make authors, to make books, and to take a longer term view than just 1 or 2 books. You have to look at a career and building a trajectory and work with authors on that, so that you can find those raw materials, the authors, and work with them on their careers for the long term. And to start with data as well as taste. We tend to be very keen on taste in publishing, but data can tell you an awful lot. So that the way that Sourcebooks start with readers and work outwards, and to provide authors with the relationships throughout the publishing company. Again, we have a tendency to guard those relationships. But if you give your author more contacts within the company, they know you better. And it's a better insurance for that long-term game of building that author's brand and career and sticking with them and having them stick with you. One of the key things as well I like was that, as Dominique said, that the CEO is the limit on an organisation, and that as a CEO you need to be learning and growing, and that you need to make sure your business is learning and growing as well, and that everyone needs to be able to take part in that. And that you need therefore a commitment to transparency so that people actually know what's going on, so that they can take responsibility and learn from things and see what growth is. And the way that she focuses on publishing things that are a solution to a problem that authors have, that retailers have, that customers have. Not just publishing a book because you like it or even because you think it'll do well, but to have that solution focus. It's something that's very common in the tech world, but it's not very common in publishing, to see the book as a product that solves a problem for somebody. So thanks very much to Dominique for that conversation. That was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do subscribe to the podcast. Give us a like or a review as well on Apple Podcasts. That really helps people to find the podcast. And come back next week when I'm going to be talking to Joe Bottrell of Out of House Publishing about outsourcing and globalization of the publishing supply chain, which is more interesting than it might sound. Hope to see you then. This was Talking Through My Hat, a podcast by John Pettigrew, founder of We Are Futureproofs. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a review at Apple Podcasts or by commenting on the website myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. You can subscribe to this channel at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is from hooksounds.com.